Good afternoon. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this afternoon's annual meeting of the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel. The first item of business before the panel this afternoon is for it to appoint its chair and vice chair for 2023-24. To explain the process, I'll begin by calling for nominations for the chair. Once we have a chair installed, they will then take nominations for the vice chair. And on that note, please may I take any nominations from the floor for the chairman? Councillor Woodings.
I'd like to nominate Christine Goldstraw, openly competition chair.
Thank you. That's a nomination of Christine Goldstraw. Mr. Vaughan Newton.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, thank you. That is a nomination that's been seconded. Are there any further nominations for the chair? In that case, may I take a vote of people for, against, and any abstentions? Okay, that is carried. Thank you all very much. And on that note, I will hand over the meeting to Christine as the chair for 23-24.
Over the following year. If I may I propose Councillor David Ellis as my vice chair? See, thank you. It was 2 or 3 seconds. Anyone else wishing to put themselves forward as vice chair? Any other nominations? In that case, can I put that to the floor, please? Everyone in favour? Anyone against? Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. You'll give me a moment to just sort my papers out and I'll be ready to get cracking. Well, we must start this afternoon by welcoming several new members to this panel, and we look forward to working with you all. I think as I look around, everyone's got a new nameplate, so I'm pleased about that. We also want to welcome the Commissioner and her team, and I know, Commissioner, you've got some new colleagues alongside yourself today, so welcome. And perhaps if we can pick up the chairman's agenda and move to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the minutes of the meeting of the 27th of March. Does anyone have any questions they wish to raise on those minutes? I don't intend to go through them slavishly, but if anyone has an issue they wish to raise, please do so now. In that case, can I propose these to the floor?
Seconded.
Seconded. Several members said thank you. Thank you for that. Back to the agenda. Apologies. Have we had apologies for today's meeting?
We have an apology today from Mayor Abrahams from Mansfield District Council. He's being substituted at this meeting by Councillor Stuart Richardson.
Thank you. Can I then move to item number 4, which are the declarations of interest by any members or officers? First of all, disposable pecuniary interests. Anyone wish to declare anything? No. Item B, private interest, pecuniary or non-pecuniary. Councillor Carlton.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your reappointment. I look forward to working again with you for this forthcoming year. I just wish to declare a personal interest in agenda item 8, as the report in various points makes reference to the Substance Misuse Partnership for Nottinghamshire, which I'm the chairman and senior responsible officer.
Thank you, Councillor Carlton. That takes us to item 5, and this is something that always challenges the panel after elections. As you will see, there's been some intensive work carried out by our democratic officers to try and come up with rationales as to making sure the appropriate attention is given to the changing landscape in the aftermath of those elections. It's a pre-meeting. Very helpfully, most colleagues were able to contribute and give their opinions of the matter. And at the moment, the motion to put forward to the floor is that we accept that there are 11 representative members from political parties on the panel. We haven't had the final information from Newark and Sherwood, but the motion is to put forward today that that's the panel composite with the independent members. Should our colleagues in Newark and Sherwood want us to rethink that, we will do that when we've heard from them, and it will be brought back to the next meeting. That was the general tenure of the discussions. So if I could put that motion to the floor, if I propose that we adopt the 11 elected members in the representation you've seen in the paper before you. Anyone object, first of all?
Chair, I understood that we had agreed 11 on the basis of 7 Labour, 3 Conservative, and 1 Ashfield Independent. Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. Anyone opposing? In that case, we carry that motion today. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Apologies, or just in the interests of clarity for any viewers of the meeting today. At the time the agenda was published, there were a number of councils who hadn't named their representative, and the report noted that they would be confirmed at the meeting. So just to clarify, the Ashfield District Council have appointed Councillor Helen Ann Smith. The second Nottingham City Council representative is Councillor Sajid Mohammed, and the Rushcliffe Borough Councillor is Councillor Rob Inglis. And as the Chair mentioned, Newark and Sherwood District Council have yet to confirm.
Commissioner.
Sorry, I'm just looking at page 14, where it said if there's 11 seats, that would be 6 Labour, 3 Conservative, 1 Ashford Independent, and 1 Independent.
I'm not sure that everyone heard.
Yeah. On page 14, if there's 11 seats, it said there should be 6 Labour, 3 Conservative, 1 Ashford Independent, and 1 Independent. But I thought Councillor Wooding just said 7 Labour, 3 Conservative, and 1 Ashford Independent.
Computations.
Just to clarify, and I don't think the rationale was necessarily given in full, particularly here. When the panel's looking at its membership and balancing the appointment, it needs to take into account not only the number of seats held by each party, but also the control of the constituent authorities. Sometimes there's a nice easy solution where everything matches up and everyone kind of nominates the right number of people from each group and everything's happy, but obviously this one doesn't square itself quite so easily, so it's a little bit of give and take. Now it may be that actually Newark and Sherwood District Council may nominate an independent member, in which case it would be as stated. The rationale discussed by the panel at the pre-meeting was that this is where the give and take comes in, to make sure that the representation of the different administrations was represented, recognising that there would be a slight swing, which was why there was the opportunity to review once Newark and Sherwood had appointed, if necessary, and there were wider concerns. So just to explain that.
Thank you for explaining.
Thank you, Anne. I think I had put the motion to the floor. I'll just check again. Was there anyone voting against that? And I don't think I saw anyone. Thank you. That takes us nicely to item 6, the work programme. I'll hand over to our learner colleague.
Thank you. Apologies, you'll end up hearing an awful lot from me these meetings, and it's a far bigger speaking part than I like. In terms of the work programme as presented, just to highlight for members, obviously we've now received information about the National Association of Police, Fire and Crime Panels annual conference. If any members of the panel are interested in attending, please hold the date, and if you can let me know once details are available for booking, we can look at making arrangements for you to attend that. In terms of the work programme itself, a couple of changes to highlight for you. We should have had an item on the agenda at this meeting from the Commissioner's office, which was about force complaints and the Commissioner's role in reviewing those. The request was made by the Commissioner's team that we roll that forward to the next meeting because of some work that's going on around that area. So that's now reflected in the work programme for September. The other change that was arising from a meeting of the panel's annual report working group was to put back the date on which the panel's annual report will be presented from the September meeting to the November meeting. So, so long as members are agreeable, we can make that change as well.
Thank you. Commissioner, our thinking around this was that having the two reports come to the same meeting, we felt it probably wasn't giving a fair amount of time to go through your comprehensive report. So we know you've got a strict time scale for that. So we thought it was probably better for all concerned if we moved ours to the November meeting or maybe even later, but certainly the November meeting we'll aim for. Hope you're agreeable to that. We thought that would give you more time to present quite a number of things in your report that we run out of time in the past, haven't we?
I think that's very wise. Thank you very much.
Councillor Woodings, thank you.
Chair, would it be possible, either under the Make Not Safe plan refresh or under the update or the performance update, to have extra information about prosecution rates and outcome rates for sexual violence and domestic violence cases, given the levels of concern nationally about the poor rates of both prosecution and conviction in those areas.
Thank you, Councillor Woodings. Let me just be clear, you're asking for this to come to a future meeting, or are you asking that perhaps the Commissioner and team will give you some indication this afternoon?
I think for today it's a bit much to ask for the additional information. However, whether it could come as part of the performance update or the PCC's update, or whether we should, obviously in January we're discussing the budget, so it doesn't really feel appropriate for there, but it's whether we actually have that additional information in September or November, one of those two meetings. I think it would be really useful for this panel to have an update on the progress and what Commissioner is doing to sort of make sure that happens.
Thank you. Do you want time to consider this outside the meeting, or are you happy to give November or September with?
I really welcome that. Thank you, Councillor Wood. It is something we are measuring. I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but I'd be very happy to be transparent to bring that. Would it make sense to do it at the November meeting rather than the September if we're doing the Make Not Safe plan update and the annual report?
Is there anything else you wanted to draw colleagues' attention to in the work programme? Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I think for the work programme, something I'd like to introduce would be sort of a review and update of rural crime. It's obviously something that's quite widespread across the whole county. Again, it's stressed in the Commissioner's original manifesto, and also to that public perception and confidence in what the police are doing. So I know a lot's being done in various parts of the county. It'd be nice to bring that together for a review to what's being done and what needs to be done.
Commissioner.
Very happy to give you a report on the rural crime. That fit in as part of my Make Not Save plan because it has been one of the main threads on that. So could we present that with the September paper?
Should fit in with our work programme.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Inglis. If there are no other questions, can we just adopt the amendments we've made to the work programme and bring that back at a later meeting? Okay, everyone, thank you. That takes us then to your first report, Commissioner. And I think it's a presentation, first of all, isn't it, on the Safer Streets, an initiative we've been hearing about for some considerable time. Welcome to your member of staff. Good afternoon. Are you okay working your gizmos from there? I think we'll be able to see it on the screen. Over to you, Commissioner. Thank you.
So I'll introduce the legend that is Phil Gilbert. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner and Chair. So there is a paper circulated which you may wish to answer. I'll ask any questions on afterwards. But what I tried to do with the presentation, which it's nicely shown up there as well. But I've also provided a handout if you're not able to see the screen. So just to walk through some of the key points of the presentation. What I thought I'd do is focus on some new items in terms of community safety. What I mean by that is for years we've always followed the numbers, we've always followed crime numbers, but what changed in Safe Streets 3, as you'll see, is a new direction in terms of feelings of safety and what makes women and girls feel unsafe and how we've responded to that. So that's why this presentation will focus a little bit more in depth on that, because it's a kind of a new area for you. So without further ado, I'll get into the presentation, and if I can move to slide 1, please. So what I want to cover within the 15 minutes is to, like I say, just focus on some of the innovative interventions that we've used in Nottingham that's actually got national acclaim now, which is quite good. So not only are we able to reach Nottinghamshire and making people feel safer and be safer, but also it's reaching national. I could talk a little bit about that. The things that's different with Safe Streets 1, 2, 3 and 4 is with Safe Streets 1, there was a focus on tackling serious acquisitive crime in neighbourhoods, and that was quite a wide definition, include bike theft and shop theft, etc. With Safe Streets 2, and you'll see a timeline shortly, that was to do with the same thing, but narrowed down to residential burglary, vehicle crime, robbery and theft from person. And then what happened in Safe Streets 3, you will recall, I'm sure, that following the murder of Sarah Everard and the conviction of the police officer Wayne Cousins, there was a major protest and a human cry as to what are the police doing and commissioners doing about the safety of women and girls, particularly in public space. And so there was a new direction given in Safe Streets 3, which was concerned with, like I said, feelings of safety and so on and so forth, which was very little known about how we tackle that area. But I'm going to talk a little bit about how our response was to that. And Safe Streets 4, which is currently underway, started last year, is actually all of that. So it's both neighbourhood crime and also violence against women and girls in public space. So that's the context. So I've talked a little bit about the history, but what I'd like to start off by saying is that in Nottinghamshire, we should be proud of the fact that we've received more funding than any other county in the whole country. And the chart that you'll see in the handout and also the report sets out exactly what that is. So we're top. This is all using the public funding that's put online by the Home Office, and we've actually created this table ourselves. West Mercia are second, but Nottinghamshire's 1.2, almost 1.3 million more than the second. And the reason for that is that we've put bids in to the highest number to maximise the amount of funding that that's been available. And as a result of that, there's been a huge effort by the Commissioner's team and also partners, because we've not done this on our own, it's all been involving partners. So we should be proud of that fact. And of course, it means that we're able to use that additional funding to make Nottinghamshire and Nottingham safer. So that table speaks for itself. We also bid for any extras as well. So Mansfield, for example, Safe Streets 2, we bid for an extra 50k. And as Tesco says, every little helps. So we bid for everything. So just the timeline then. Safe Streets 1, it came in July 20. You will remember this year because it was the year of COVID. So we put bids in and we didn't know whether it was going to go ahead because of the restrictions, and we had to think out the box in terms of how we engage with members of the public with all the COVID restrictions. But nevertheless, we did succeed, and that was we only limited it to one project because unfortunately the city were tied down with capacity issues dealing with COVID, so we only put one bid in, like most other people. That followed the year 2 with Safe Streets 2, and that was again neighbourhood crime. We put 2 bids in, which was the maximum in Mansfield and City, and they were successfully concluded. I have to say also that not only do we bid for the most, but we don't give any money back either. So yeah, we make sure that we maximise all the funding available. So there's very little underspends. With Safer Streets 3, again, this was a Vork focus. The 2 areas that met the best criteria for that was Ashfield and Bassett Law. And the other thing I'd like to say at this point is that we're bidding against a criteria. The Commission often gets questions asked about why have you done this? Well, a lot of the time we're bound by the criteria that's set within the funding. So we work within them parameters and we consult as far as possible in terms of how we're going to tackle the solutions. But in terms of the areas, we have to meet certain criteria. So area selection is often based on the criteria that's set before us.
Can I just ask, was that national criteria or something?
Yes.
Was national criteria?
National, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes, national criteria. Yeah, so they often say you've got to have a benchmark of burglaries, say 8.71 per thousand population, and therefore you have to evidence that these areas meet the criteria. So once you get through that first hurdle, it's then okay, what's the nature of the problem, and so on and so forth. So that is the start of it, and that's often why. And the other thing that's interesting about this, Chair, is that with Safer Streets, there was a change of direction because for years we've often focused on volumes of crime where most crime is occurring. So with Safer Streets 1, a lot of people were surprised why Newark was chosen. But what the Home Office were doing was looking at areas of high crime density. So that if you're going to be putting in CCTV and ANPR cameras, then you would have maximum impact because you're putting in areas where, it's going to yield more benefit. Because as you know, some areas, say like Aspley, it's a massive area, but they want to put cameras and other interventions in concentrated areas. So that was another restriction. So the rate forced people to move into high concentrated areas, and that's why Newark was chosen. So the Swan project was another kind of initiative, very short, a lot of pressure. I didn't lead on that personally, but that was all about tackling Vorg and in the city centre and nighttime economy. And then we're currently underway with violence against women and girls in public space. And I'm pleased to say that the Commissioner was really keen that we bid for every area. This is really unique for Nottingham because rather than using the criteria, we were quite creative in the way that we selected it. So we were allowed to put 4 bids in. So we did it by 4 CSPs. So the city, Mansfield and Ashfield, South Notts, which is Rushcliffe, Roxtowe and Gedling, and Bassett Law, Nottinghamshire. So 4 bids, but every single authority had a hotspot. And within them hotspots, we were able to do it, able to put plans in. And so currently every single authority, including the city, has got a project underway, and there's nowhere else where that's happening. And partly the benefit of that is that, as everybody would want, people were disappointed when they weren't selected for previous rounds. In this way, everybody was able to have some funding to do something within their local hotspots. It's quite challenging to manage because effectively we've got not only 4 project boards but 9 delivery groups, and overall there's over 100 projects going off across the whole of Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. This particular bid has got the national interest of the Home Office. We've got a very good reputation because we're seen as being achievers and also innovative, as you'll see. So I'd just really like to focus on something different that we responded to with Safer Streets 3, which was again following the Sarah Everard murder, and also our responses, because there was very little information in the public domain is what drives fear of crime for women and girls. We didn't really know. We did some desktop research. We got a bit of an idea, but we actually undertook some focus groups with some students in universities and also women's centres, and we used the desktop research to work out what questions we ought to ask on those focus groups. And some of these items I'm going to list here in bullet points shows you the sort of things that came up. And I have to say, as a male, I've been in the game of community safety for many years, since 1980. I was really this was really new to me. I didn't understand the sort of things that women and girls do, whereas males don't do. So it was an eye opener for me. And like, for example, a lot of the women and girls said, and this was quite repetitive, it says, I avoid streets and areas I consider most risky. They stick to the main roads where next to houses where people could shout for help. Across the road to avoid workmen on building sites for catcalling. I use routes where there are places to escape, like late night shops, etc. You know, McDonald's or petrol station. They work it out in advance, particularly if they're walking in the public domain. I use my phone, my mobile phone, or pretend to be on my mobile phone in some risky situations. I change or wear my clothing to avoid drawing attention to myself. Use my car to avoid public transport, even though it's costly. I think if I'm thinking of being followed, they'll take a different route. They'll stop off at a place of safety, which they weren't planning to. They won't go out at all. This is one that's really debilitating or really impacted me. A lot of girls say they simply don't go out. You know, this is where nothing's actually happened, but they're so fearful they don't go out, because they don't feel safe. So nothing's happened. The other thing I would say is when we looked at the stats for crimes against women and girls in public space, it was really small. So I think in one of the areas of Bassett law, over a 3-year period, it was something like 65 that met the criteria. So you've got a massive mismatch between perception of fear and actual fear. I use my bike if it's safer. I'll walk with friends home or to accompany me. I carry a personal safety device. Let people know where I'm starting a journey and finishing a journey. I put on a dominant walk. I walk like a man, not to appear vulnerable. And so for me, when I learnt of all this, I thought, you know what, I've learnt something here. So if I've learnt something, what about other males who also may not be aware of this? And not only that, but what can we do with this information to make women and girls feel safer? So this is the thinking around what we did in Safer Streets 3. So, and I'll pick up some of the innovations and you'll see why we're doing some of this stuff, and I'll refer back to the focus groups. We did actually do a survey using some of those key findings to test out whether those were just unique to the focus groups or whether it was a wider issue. So the things that I've listed there are those that were supported with quite high percentage with other people in the target areas of Ashfield and Bassett Lawn. So this is Safer Streets 4. So we bid for £3 million, the 4 major bids. We got that successfully. Again, this was about neighbourhood crime, residential vehicle crime and robbery. For the first time with Safer Streets 4, they actually included antisocial behaviour, which I thought was really good. Because previously, and those that have been in the community safety game know that ASB and crime are often highly correlated together. So it was good that we were able to look at this issue alongside neighbourhood crime. And of course, VOG, as it's known, violence against women and girls in public spaces. So what we did in choosing each intervention, we worked very closely with partners. We had an assessment done, an environmental assessment of every area. Partners were involved in putting proposals that were within what was considered best practice and what we'd previously done in Safe Streets 3. And so we got funded budgets to with all the different types of intervention which would considered best practice nationally, with a few caveats. We tested a few ideas like the CCTV refuge cameras, like safe space accreditation scheme, and other training to combat some of the issues that had arisen. So what I want to do now is to very quickly, and if I run out of time, just with the yellow card. But this of the 4 CSPs, I just want to focus on some of the interventions that are quite unique, and I will skip over it because of time. So this is quite unique as well. In terms of the visibility, what the focus groups showed is that they want to see more visible policing on the streets, and so one of the barriers to that was the laptops. Police officers and PCSOs not having laptops, so we used some of the funding in the South Notts area to allow officers to PCSOs to have laptops, so that instead of coming back to the station, they could actually get the information there and then. And as a result of that, this is in the areas of Trent Bridge, West Bridgeford, Eastwood South, Broxtowe and Netherfield, in those areas that you see on the chart, and Gedling. So a high proportion of their working times are now spent on their beats, and again that improves satisfaction and feelings of safety. And overall, the travelling time is reduced by 2/3, which is a real efficiency saving. As a result of it, in these target areas, we're able to have more visibility for PCSOs. If you put a notional value on that, that's 660 hours looking at the maths, that equates to 21,700 so far. This is a Q4. Of course, there will be year-on-year benefits with this as well. In addition, this is an innovative project with in Broxtowe. We bought 2 electric bikes. This was in Eastwood South, and it enables it's kind of that a step between foot patrol and vehicle patrol, where they're actually on electric bikes, so they can get about quicker. They can get into these routes that cars can't travel down to follow criminals. And there's been some really good cases where local officers have made arrests that wouldn't ordinarily have been able to make by these electric bikes. So much so that I think everybody wants some of these electric bikes now. So yeah, so it's good. It's paid off, and this was an initiative by a local inspector. So they use them about 28 hours a week. The other thing is looking at the environment. They also reduce the carbon footprint because although you have to charge the batteries, overall you're not using vehicles. It's very local, and like I said, you can get to hard to reach areas. The city, Nottingham City, the burglary reduction officer, who's doing a really good job there in the city. Last year in Safe Streets 2, the target hardened 440 houses, and we did the Home Office asked for some analysis around this as a case study, and only one of those 444 houses were repeat victimised for burglary. That's a massive improvement, and that was to do with and that house had just got a Ring doorbell. So we reflected on that, and we thought, well, we need to be thinking about making the security visible. Like most of our target hardening includes 4G cameras that have got these infrared lights beaming down at you to put you off even coming close. But anyway, this year we're working in in Bestwood and also the Arboretum, and we're using the same methodology we've used before in terms of gold, silver, and bronze. That determines how much funding is allocated to a victim, again based on a good, sensible criteria. So far, 1,267 residents have been offered target hardening, and of these, 163 have taken it up. What's quite surprising is that even though you make an offer for free target hardening, almost 70% of individuals don't want it, which is quite surprising. A lot of the time it's like those such things as a free lunch, but actually on this occasion there was. But it is surprising that the take up is not always, taken. So we work on a 30% factor now. So So yeah, we haven't done any gold, because to qualify for a gold, you've got to be a repeat victim. So you've got to be a victim in the target area. You've got to be a repeat victim within 12 months, and you've also got to be vulnerable based on the police definition. But silver is like the next step down. So you can see it's all based on risk assessment. It's based on need, and that's how we apportion the funding. So this is a really good news story. It is tried and tested. We know that it works. Again, quite innovative. This is the city again, in terms of publicising and all the work that the city has done with the consent coalition and trying to create safe space. They've got a CPO, community protection officer van, badged up. It goes out into areas of high vulnerability. It parks up, it engages with people, and it's a safe space for anybody that's in need. It's a bit like the cameras that we have in Ashfield and others. And again, the fire service have also got some marketing badged up in their fire appliances. I'm going to have to skip through
While
some
you're pausing for breath for me, I'm just intrigued. The people who declined your offer, which is a pretty significant number of householders who declined, have you done any research into why that was?
Some of them, well, you take West Bridgeford, for example, they don't like the ring doorbells and they want something else. And unfortunately, we have a contractor, so we have to go through a commissioning process, and they only provide certain ring doorbells. So some people are quite picky. I have to say my wife's quite picky as well. Yeah, it's those kind of issues. Some of them, when they've done the risk assessment, they've already done something about it. Or like some will want sort of metal fluorescent flowery gates, and we have to do what is kind of bare minimum for using public funds. So it's those kind of issues, and others. Some student accommodation and landlords, particularly landlords, they don't want it. They don't want the hassle. So it is surprising, but I think it's a really good question. I think we do need to do some more work on that. But we do use the money is not wasted. We do use it, and we do use it. But it is surprising why some people don't take it up. In fact, interesting. There's some of that research I mentioned, Chair. Those that declined the offer were actually subsequently burgled, which is quite interesting. That maybe if they'd have taken up the offer, they would have had that burglary prevented, which is an interesting fact. So, the consent coalition. You've all seen the trams. It's the A to Z. It's been highly publicised by the commissioner and the local team. Launched on the 12th of May. This is all about trying to deter, and this is the educational element of the violence against women and girls in public space. So if you've not had a chance, have a look at there is a web link, I think, in the report that points you to where all these posters are. It gives you more information. I'll talk a little bit about Mansfield and Ashfield. I picked up some pictures. The Safe Space Accreditation Scheme was a really innovative approach to trying to build capacity for safe spaces. Remember when I mentioned to you about women and girls saying that there isn't anywhere to go when they need help? So what we thought about what can we do to build capacity? And so in these areas, we've created schemes in all the target areas. So in Ashfield, for example, there's over 40 business premises that have had target hardening in terms of cameras. As you see on this picture, this is an example in there where these state-of-the-art cameras that protect their curtilage and also recording 24/7. So if there is an incident where people want to come in there, anybody's following them, it's all captured. All of the staff are trained in terms of what to do if they deal with a vulnerable person coming into there. The police have trained them. There's an accreditation scheme. The commissioner does an accreditation scheme every year. There'll be one this year for the new scheme. And to be accredited, you've got to have the CCTV, the training, and so on and so forth. At the moment, nobody's there's not been any issues that we can record other than incidents outside the shop where there's been, I think, violent robbery where it was detected and the CCTV from the premises was used for that purpose. But in terms of the intended purpose, there are no episodes. So I won't go into the detail, but the paper that you have before you sets out the numbers so far that are certified and the number of incidents that are being managed, etc., and reported to the police, but nothing really of significance. The one I'd like to highlight is again, the CCTV refuge cameras. Again, there's nowhere to go. What do we do if we panic? What do we do if we're another Sarah Everard, where we're running for help? We don't know where to go. Something along those lines. And so we created the first in the country, if not the world, CCTV refuge cameras that are painted white, that are visibly different from all the other CCTV cameras. There's a help point. When you press the button, there's a blue light that comes on. You get immediate response by the local authority. They will risk assess it. There's a pan, tilt and zoom camera that's zooming around, looking at the incident, risk assessing it, and then they engage with the caller. If the risk assessment suggests that the police need to attend, the video is actually pumped through to the police control room, who send and dispatch a vehicle, and the police respond to that incident. Pleased to say that there are very few examples where that's been needed in its intended, but I will mention an example that happened in Bassett Law, where a young female pressed the button, cry for help. She was intending to commit suicide. She pressed this button, thank God, and they encountered her, they engaged with her, and police went to help her, and obviously she was supported for mental health issues. But actually, it wasn't intended for that purpose, but it's another example of a resource being available and someone being helped. And in this, there's we've got 3 at Ashfield, there's 5 at Bassett Law, there's 1 at Retford, and there's more in the city. We're expanding these as we go. Nationally, I'm told there's a company called WCCTV that's rolling this out, and as a result of what we're doing in Nottingham, there's a lot of national interest. In fact, only this morning there was an inquiry from, I think, Northumbria, asking about these cameras that were set up in Nottingham. So we're getting, the reach is beyond Nottinghamshire. So these are the ones in Ashfield and also Bassett Law. In the thing I'll probably try and finish on Bassett Law, Nottinghamshire, is the wardens. So these are Safer Streets wardens. It's a slightly different model. So it's not only high visible patrols to prevent antisocial behaviour. We're also doing this in Rushcliffe and also Gedlin. In Councillor Dave Ellis's area in Gedlin, Netherfield and Collick. We've got Safer Streets wardens down there. They also working with a shop watch radio scheme, trying to respond to calls down there, and also Rushcliffe, Trent Bridge Ward and Bassett Law. But Bassett Law they've got a lot of their funding allocated to Safe Streets wardens. And it's not only about enforcement, but it's also trying to divert young people into positive activities. So it's a bit of a hybrid role. Something that's quite unique to Newark is the safe gyms. And again, along this line of if people are feelings of fear in public space, there was some research done locally, and they did a survey and they found out that actually there's a lot of fear associated with gyms. A lot of women feel that they're being looked at, stared at, and made to feel uncomfortable. And so there's a small project going off in Newark to try and work with the fitness centres to improve the way fitness centres can make women and girls feel safer. The survey so far is 448 people, and there's some issues that's been identified with that, and out of that they will work with the providers to see if they can make things make changes to make them feel safer, and that's still going on. Stared at, unsolicited advice, women actually going there to do a workout, before they know it there's some burly chap coming there trying to show them how to lift weights and things. They feel very uncomfortable. It's this kind of thing. And of course gyms are the management are oblivious to these kind of issues. So we're trying to work with them to improve feelings of safety. So I'm sorry it's a lot to cram in, but I would say we have done an awful lot of work over these years, and I'm sorry if I've missed out any area that you represent, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you very much indeed for a very interesting run through. It's probably got a lot more detail behind it, I'm sure. Very interesting to hear the outcomes of the project, and I think I'm sure we're going to have one or two additional questions. But Mr. Gilbert, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative and helpful things for us to look at here as well. Thank you. I've got Councillor Woodings first of all, please.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very helpful report to understand some of the things across the county that these Safer Streets money have been funding. I wanted to ask from a Nottingham City perspective, but I understand it affects other parts of the county as well. For example, in Nottingham, I know that we've funded in a particular area of the city where there's been a lot of concentrated examples of antisocial behaviour. There have been ring doorbells fitted onto people's properties. And I mean, I looked into those, and where you have where it's recording footage that can later be used and sent to the police as evidence, there is a subscription fee associated with that ring doorbell. And similarly, the Consent Coalition work, which I think was originally mooted as a project before COVID, actually, by all the different partners, including Nottinghamshire Police. But it's basically, I mean, it's really great work. It's reaching into areas that not been touched before, but it's funded on a year-on-year basis. And so for a lot of these projects, the funding runs out after September 2023. And similarly, you just showed us the lamppost there and saying that the local authority is obviously staffing that lamppost on a 24/7 basis. So there are sort of ongoing year-on-year costs for the things being introduced into Safer Streets. And I wonder if there's what we can do in essence to maintain the provision beyond the life of the actual project. I'm not sure that the householders who've had the ring doorbells fitted will be able to afford the subscription for the ring doorbell going forward. And similarly, the ANPR CCTV funding, Shopwatch funding, that's something again that has a shelf life. Once the funding ends, we don't know really what happens then. So, have you sort of had any thoughts about the ongoing funding of those projects beyond the official funding of the Safer Streets Fund money?
Sorry. If I just start off and then pass across to Phil. I was really keen that there was a real long-term legacy work with this Safer Street funding. So wherever we could, we've built in things that are going to last after the project. For example, the CCTV, the really exciting new CCTV, the maintenance of that carries on for years after the actual project finishes. And with the Consent Coalition stuff, that's about changing attitudes, which I think is one of the best things we can do to prevent violence against women and girls in the future. But with more specifics, I'll pass over to Phil.
Yeah, thank you. Really good questions, Councillor. The Home Office, when you submit the bid, they wanted to see something like 40% of your bid submissions to have year-on-year benefits. So you're absolutely right to pick up on sustainability, because it was actually a condition of grant that your bid actually is apportioned on interventions that do have year-on-year benefits. So CCTV, as you'll have seen in the report, is a high proportion of the funding. And what we've also done with that is the maintenance issues is also costed within that. So where you've got CCTV, the maintenance is built into either 3 years or 5 years, as well as part of it. So even though you may have funded this year, it's the maintenance is also paying for the next 5 years. So as regards ANPR, then obviously the police have agreed to continue maintaining the ANPRs around across the force, and there's over £250,000 worth of additional ANPR cameras, and these ANPR cameras are fantastic. You know, I was really surprised is in a 3-month period you're getting over 1 million hits of intelligence, and when you narrow it down in any month you've got something like 30 positive responses to incidents. And this is not only this year, but it's every year. There's a year-on-year benefit of intelligence. As regards to ring doorbells, most of the ring doorbells that we fit also have a memory card as well, so it can record to the subscription is something that you can add if you want, which saves you the trouble of getting it from the SIM card, the data card, to it's a cloud subscription, so you don't need to capture the data from the cloud. You can do it through the SIM. It's a marketing ploy. I've got one myself, and you know, they want you to subscribe all the time, so they do that. But I personally favour the 4G CCTV camera because that is just as effective as the ring doorbell and is more conspicuous. But you'll see in the paper there's a table in there that talks about sustainability, and you'll see that we've actually invested most of the money in sustainable solutions. Yeah, it's absolutely true. Where you've got training issues, you can't. You know, it's if you take students in Lantern Triangle, you get new students every year, as you well know, councillor, and that's why we targeted that area. By targeting the household, working with landlords, you kind of moving the students out of the way, making it tougher. But it's training is one thing. You've got to continue at it. That is an issue, and that is something that you will have to consider going forward. But all the other items do have sustainable benefits.
Yeah, I mean, I was hoping that the Consent Coalition would become business as usual as well, because obviously we have a generation of children growing up, and that need to reinforce the concept of consent is something that I hope might become business as usual and not necessarily need special project funding in order to continue it, because it feels as though if we're ever going to do prevention work and changing hearts and minds, that's not something that's going to happen over a 12-month period, is it? You'll hit a certain number of people, but there's a whole generations of people coming behind that as well.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ellis, then Mr. Bob Vaughan-Newton, and then Miss Leslie Darby.
Thank you, Chair, and obviously I welcome this additional funding, and I welcome Phil's efforts in pulling the bids together, especially for South Notts, where we think we were in danger of missing out on the safer streets. So it was creativity came to the fore there. So thank you for that. I think we have to recognise though that funding such as this is an indication that austerity has gone too far. That in the past, local authorities and CSPs had money to do this sort of thing, and they've lost that. So this is sort of substituting for those cuts. Although that funny money comes with overheads and a lot of delivery difficulties in developing schemes, and some of these seem very short-term schemes. So it's a credit that we've actually done something on them. I suppose there's two questions. There's a lot in this report about activity, but not a lot about impact. So two questions, I suppose, are how you measure impact and how you demonstrate value for money.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Sorry. It's early days yet, particularly with the South Notts one, to be measuring impact. We will continue to do that. And you've seen when we went out together and we saw the shop watch scheme with the radios, we know that's having an impact already on that estate. And also the wardens that were there also some of them are the same wardens that were in West Bridgeford, and they recognised travelling criminals who used to hop on the public transport to get down to the different places. So they were spotting them and stopping things being taken before. So we know it's having an impact, but the data will come later. But with my team here, particularly Dan and the policy guys, they will be all over this, measuring it to make sure it has an impact.
Sorry, Chair. Just to add to the Commissioner's points there, we do an end of project survey because in addition to measure, it's every meeting now we're analysing the results in terms of is crime coming down, is the target crimes coming down. We're monitoring that, but more importantly, it's do the community notice a difference. So we, at the end of the project, we're already starting to think about preparing leaflets on, like you said we did, which will go out probably July, August, to say to the communities, this is what we've done in your area. And then probably a month or so later, we will do a survey. We've done it every year so far. And what we've learned from that is that actually the local community do value the work we've done. We haven't mentioned anything in here like street lighting, but actually one thing that we did notice is the public were more, something like 65-70% of the public felt safer as a result of improved street lighting. So it's a question of what makes you feel safer. So we did this, did it make you feel safer? And so it kind of validates some of the work we've done, and we will do the same thing in every area that we're working with, and we can bring you the results of that at a subsequent panel report. So we finished the projects on 30th September, and then we'll have the findings of every project in terms of what the public communities have felt as a result of that. So that's one way, Councillor, of evaluating whether it's worked or not.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellis?
Only so I look forward to seeing the report.
Thank you. Mr. Balfour-Newton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have three parts to my question. Based on the outcomes of each of the different phases, which projects do you feel have had the greatest impact? Secondly, what learning from specific Safer Streets projects do you anticipate rolling out more widely, and what learning have you taken from those initial projects? And finally, which projects do you think have given the best bang for their buck, and why?
Yeah, so I put my speaker on. So I think the original project, and this is, I don't know if anybody knows this, in Newark, Chatham Court. Chatham Court was an area with this high concentration of crime, and it's on numbers alone, it wouldn't be necessarily the hotspot for the police because they were dealing with areas and a lot bigger, but concentration of crime was a place called Chatham Court, where there's something like 50 or 60 properties, residents. And I say it's a den of iniquity because there was drug dealing, there was begging, the place looked an eyesore with fly tipping, bikes being stolen, drug dealing, etc., and doors being left open. So we spent something like £70,000 on that. So 50,000 from Safe Streets 1, 20,000 from local authorities match funding, and they completely changed the security of them premises. So they put bike locks and sheds in the area. They cleaned the environment up. They put a new door entry system in. Every single property had a door entry system changed, security changed. And also what's quite unique about this is that people used to bus people in, and the doors would just be left open. And so you've got drug dealing and taking in the communal areas. Now, if you press the button as a resident, it keeps buzzing in your house until that door shuts. So if you press the button, you've got to make sure that the door's shut, and that in itself is actually fantastic crime prevention, because it's quite annoying to hear this buzzer going off. And the reason why I think it's an exception is that Newark and Sherwood are in the runners-up for that scheme in local authorities for crime prevention, and all of the people that live in them areas feel really safe compared to where they were. All the problems almost disappeared overnight, and that's just one area. So you can make a difference. So I think that's question one. What was the other one? Value for money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
best bang for the buck. Well, that sounded like the best bang for the buck out of the
yeah.
lot, really. Um, and the project that's had the greatest impact. I mean, anything that can reduce the fear of crime in that kind of way has to be applauded.
So just on that, in terms of taking it forward, we did the same process in another place in Newark called Tide Barn. It's another complex. So we took the learning from that and we've applied it in Safe Streets 4 to a place called Tide Barn in Newark. And again, because we're building on best practice, we're building on what we know works and what improves safety. So that's an example of how we take that learning forward. In terms of other areas, what we've done is that things that have worked, we roll out to another area. So, for example, you remember me speaking about the focus group about women and girls using phones. We've actually funded, and we did it with Safe Streets 3 in Ashfield, a technical app. So it's an app that you can download to your phone, Android or iPhone, and it's called Hollyguard. So we piloted a number of these apps, and Hollyguard came out top. And now, instead of pretending to be on your phone, these apps are so sophisticated now that once you've enacted it, if your phone drops, it sends a message to 5 of your emergency contacts to say it's happened. It switches on the video to record and the sound that it's recording. So if you've got that, it's you think about the Sarah Everard. If that was if that happened to her and she got Hollyguard and her phone dropped, then you know the precise location of where the person is. It's recording audio and video, and also you've got 5 contacts that are able to ring and say what's going off, and then alert the police to where the location is. And there's much more. So we've actually rolled it out in Ashfield to start with, but we took that learning and now we're applying it to Warsop in Mansfield and Ashfield. So another example of how we're taking that learning from one area to another.
Did you want to come back? Good. That's okay. Mrs. Dolver, thank you.
Thank you. Interesting presentation. I'm looking at your safe space accreditation, and you've put quite a lot of resource into this, but no take up so far. How would I know if I felt in fear that I could go into a
It's
place
a really
that
good
was
question.
safe space?
Yeah, really good question. So what we have is we tried to market it, we tried to publicise it in the local areas, but in the windows there's actually a sign that's quite conspicuous that says Safe Space Accreditation Scheme, and it's illuminated as well. So that's in the front of the window. But you're right, we do need to continue to keep on top of it so that we are alerting people, and also the white cameras, the refuge cameras. It's a bit like what Councillor Woodings was saying, is that you've got to continue repeating the message until it penetrates. But we're doing what we can. But there is a sign in the window. We publicise it. John, our comms lead, head of service, he's continually putting out messages to the community to make them aware of it. And we're using all means of social media to try and reach those that would benefit from the service.
Are there any of these businesses, those that are open later at night, such as the
No, that's one of the problems.
forecourts?
Yeah, I mean that's another good question. When the shop shuts at 5, most of them do 5:30. It was a question I dealt with. What do you do after 5:30? Because the businesses are not actually the CCTV's running, it's 24/7, but you've not got that capacity, and that gave birth to the idea of can we build a 24/7 capacity, and that's how the CCTV refuge cameras came to be. So we put them in the hotspots as a way of supplementing this kind of nighttime economy. Businesses closed. So yeah, it's really spot on with your questions there.
Okay. The safe spaces during the nighttime economy is something I'm particularly proud of. That came about through the the Swan Safety of Women at Night. So it was a safer street bit, and it was really great because it got an opportunity to work with the council and also with the Nottingham bid and Consent Coalition and different organisations all together. And those spaces are available in the evening, and it also means that nighttime economy staff are all trained on what to look out for. So that was really important.
Thank you.
With the daytime, the ones that are in the shops, etc., I was a little surprised when I went to see an optician's, and it was all women working as opticians, and they said they felt safer because they'd got the safe space cameras for themselves in the shop, and that's sad that they had to feel that way, but they actually liked the fact that they'd got really high quality CCTV and they felt protected because of that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just ask? I mean, this was obviously an important project for women and girls. Has there been much take up by young men in situations that are difficult?
The short answer is no, Chair. But it is available. So if someone was to, try and seek support, they would get the same support. So that's part of the training. So although it was intended to bring in support for women and girls, anybody that feels vulnerable will get that service. But at the moment, it's not used as much as we anticipated. There are a few ad hoc cases, like I mentioned earlier, but the usage is not as much as we expected, which I think is probably a good thing in a way. It's a resource there.
Can I just ask, is it as widely publicised as it has been for the initial project?
Yes, I think we could do more. And we're always pushing it out. In fact, there's more publicity around these projects, and that's probably one for Commissioner's head of comms to continually promote. And certainly, I think it's probably a good idea to continue to promote it. One for you, John.
Councillor Head, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Bob's question regarding evaluation and outcomes, how much of a game changer does Commissioner feel by using a qualitative approach rather than the historic quantitative approach to the design of Safe Streets 4? How much of a difference that's made, and will you be able to measure that? And also, going forward, would it be appropriate to use the qualitative approach on other protective characteristics, BAME communities, LGBT, etc.? Thank you.
The bids that we put in, we have to look at the theory of change, and it's a really tough criteria. We will continue to do that. Want to add anything, Bill?
Yes, Commissioner, Councillor, you're absolutely right. One of the other additional questions we asked in the survey was whether individuals felt that they were victimised or felt fear because of their personal characteristics of the LGBTQ, or whether it was to do with ethnicity or all the other characteristics. And I have to say, there was a high proportion of women that were black, that were LGBTQ, that felt more unsafe than any other group. So you're absolutely right when you're thinking about how we take this forward, because we do know that people with the protected characteristics feel more unsafe based on the survey findings than other groups. So the more vulnerable you are, the more vulnerable you feel unsafe. So there is a correlation there from what I've seen from the survey results.
Thank you. Did you want to come back, Councillor? No, thank you. Councillor Richardson, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I applaud the Safe Streets in Basildon, especially because I live in Worksop itself. We have the cameras, where I know where they are. We have all the wardens, which are wonderful, but we do not have PCSOs walking the streets anymore. I don't know whether that's a combination of we just don't get them. I don't see them. And when I was on the Prime panel before, I was told that the PCSOs were just employed to have one person walking around. We don't get that anymore on our estates. The residents are feeling really safe, and they applaud all the cameras and everything, especially the youngsters walking around now. But they still feel not safe because we don't see them. I spoke to a couple of police officers that were on the beat, and he said we could walk up and down Worksop twice and then got called away. And by the time we've got reports to write, we can't get back. So we don't see them. But that's my thing. Although the safety, all this is done, the residents still don't feel they should have someone walking. They're in the town, the safe street wardens, and they are really good at the job, and I've met lots of them. But they are really good. But out of town and rural areas, they don't get them, and we're very rural up there anyway. So mine is, I know a few PCSOs that out in the rural cities like County and Truro would know, but we don't get them in the towns. I'm just wondering, I know it's probably not from the Safer Streets aspect of getting funding, but I just want to know why we haven't got them and why they're not there anymore. Is it a council thing, or is it actually your remit for that thing?
I've actually committed to keep the same number of PCSOs. I know that other police forces are reducing them, but we've got 150, and in the budget, that's what we've committed to keep. I have walked around and worked up with PCSOs, but you're right. Bassett is a vast area, and there's not that many PCSOs up there. You know, for how big the area is. But thank you for the comments that about the safe street wardens, because they are filling a gap at the moment, and I think that's really important.
Thank you. Are there any other comments at all? Councillor Woodings.
No, I would just say that we've had the case of Sarah Everard quoted twice by yourself, but you know the root cause of that was poor police vetting on recruitment, poor police complaints standard, opportunities missed, and she was actually arrested, handcuffed, and murdered by a serving police officer. So I think the point about the Safer Streets initiative, you know, we're talking about women regulating their behaviour on a daily basis, and women having to carry apps with them, and women having special safe spaces to go into. I think what we should be aiming for is a space where women don't have to do that. We don't have to think about phoning home before we set off for home at night. And I just think we could get, you know, I think within the whole umbrella of this, what we actually need to do is talk about changing hearts and minds and speaking to young men and speaking to perpetrators about their behaviour and rehabilitating perpetrators from their behaviour as well. So really good initiatives and so on. But I think the Sarah Everard case is a poor example of actually this. What we did in Nottinghamshire was declare misogyny a hate crime and say that the street harassment of women is unacceptable. And that's not necessarily to a crime level, but actions took place on the basis of that. I would like to see misogyny made a hate crime nationally, so there is an uplift in sentencing for every crime regulated by hate. But I hope that we won't lose that essential part of saying this behaviour is unacceptable, and women should not have to regulate their behaviour to deal with, you know, the everyday street harassment. And when you say you're surprised about it, I would ask you to just refer you to the hashtag everyday sexism on Twitter, where you will see daily, hourly examples of the sort of, you know, reality of society of how women are made to feel on, you know, on a daily basis, trying to live their normal lives in peace and quiet without being harmed. So I just think we shouldn't ever get away from the point that misogyny should be a hate crime. Nottinghamshire police declared misogyny a hate crime, record it as a hate crime, and take action on that basis, and speak to individuals who, like, for example, build construction workers, van drivers who walk past and harass. You know, I'm in a women's running group, and we get people shout stuff out as they drive past. We take their number plates and report them. We don't just sit by and actually deal with that. But I would just like to get to a stage where we don't ever have to think about that.
Thank you for those comments. I'm sure they'll be taken on board. If there are no further questions, thank you everyone, and thank you, Philip, for coming this afternoon. Most interesting, and we thank you for that, and thank the Commissioner. That takes us nicely into item 8, Commissioner, which is your update report. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll start with following on from what you just brought up, if that's okay, from Councillor Woodings. I'm total agreement that this is our Nottingham, our city, and it should be a zero tolerance approach to any forms of misogyny. It is absolutely a hate crime, which is why I'm really proud of the work we've been doing with the Consent Coalition to have those conversations. I mentioned that in 3.3 because it's preventative work that I'm really keen to do. It's also worth saying that we're developing a pilot at the moment, which is a sexual violence prevention programme. I have been horrified by some of the stuff that Andrew Tate says, and that whole extreme misogyny stuff that's out there. And this is we're going to do a pilot programme in a couple of schools, and it's going to be targeted at it's going to be developed with young men who have extreme views, and it's going to be who've been flagged that are having issues, and developing and piloting and reviewing something. So really tackling those extreme misogyny, because we've got to change the attitudes. I completely agree with you. Another thing that I'm very proud of is the work that we've on 3.6 is the work that we've been doing with the VRP. I'm very conscious that the VRP, the work it does, has a long-lasting impact. And one of the things that I'm keen that happens, we have a legacy of trained youth workers. So you can actually get free training through the VRP for youth workers. And we've been listening to young people, and they've created a youth charter, which is how they would like to be dealt with in projects. And we're actually launching that. This give you a quick flash of it. Can't give you much more. That's going to be launched this Thursday at the Nottingham City Council House. So just moving on to improving our approach to reducing reoffending. 3.14. This is using I talked there about alcohol tags and the remote breath project. We mentioned that briefly at the last police and crime panel, but it's moved on massively since then. Now in Nottinghamshire, we are the first place in Europe to be using these remote breath units. Imagine it looks like a phone, but it's got facial recognition on it, and you get a text alert to breathe into it, and it's being used as a step down. So for people, some people can drink without getting into bother. Sadly, some people, when they drink, it reduces their inhibitions and they make some really bad choices. And for people who are on the IOM programme, after they've been on the alcohol tags on their ankles for a while, it's then a step down for them to go onto the remote breathalyzers. So, which we're starting that in Nottinghamshire a couple of weeks ago. And I was also really proud that we've actually, at the training session that I went to, my regional colleagues were there too, not PCCs, but regional forces, because Nottinghamshire's being seen as ahead of the game on what we're doing with the alcohol tags. 3.15, policing the digital beat. I held the first fraud partnership meeting in May. I didn't realise there isn't fraud partnership meetings in other places. The banks and some of the charities and the councils that were there said they'd never been invited to one before, but it really makes sense to join that up, because sadly we know that people are more likely to be a target of fraud than any other type of crime. And actually, not everybody knows how to protect themselves from fraud, or knows if they are a victim of fraud where to report it to. So we need some really clear messaging, and we're doing a lot of work around that. And also, we've got a lot of engagement activity planned for it. If I move on to 3.19, that's talking about antisocial behaviour. We're one of the 10 trailblazer sites to pilot the immediate justice programme. this is going to be quite a challenge to do, but we're working really hard to see how it can happen. The aim is to see reparative action as early as 48 hours after the condition has been granted. Now, when we've dug into this, only 7% of ASB ends up with an out-of-court disposal. Most of the ASB tends to be left with the council. So we're really keen that we can work with councils to look at how we can tackle this together, and I've been looking for any champions there. I've also announced my successful recipients of my thematic grants for rural crime. Operation Swift is really innovative. That's across the Newark area. It started when some youngsters were they'd got slingshots and they were attacking birds, and to help them develop a better love of nature and understand the impact of what they were doing, we had a very innovative wildlife officer who set up a programme with them at Hillholt Wood. And these young people now have a real love of nature and are respecting nature a lot more and haven't reoffended. So we're looking to build that programme up more. And as you know, I've got a real passion for tackling any domestic abuse. And I've also funded some more outreach by a charity called Equation to do a programme to raise awareness of domestic abuse in rural communities. If I move to 3.25, you can see there, we've now got, thank you very much to all the councils who've all agreed to pay in to support the SERAC model, which is a commitment to the Slavery and Exploitation Risk Assessment Conference, multi-agency working together. Moving on to governance and accountability. I obviously carry on with my accountability boards and regular meetings with the Chief Constable, but also really embedding now the independent community scrutiny panel, the ICSP. Now they're all vetted, so they can actually get to see the body worn camera for the stop and search and other things. And we've also got the more informal independent advisory group. And you'll also see at 4.4, we now have a youth advisory group, and they just amaze me with the ideas they come out with. They've put together a really lovely little video which is aimed at other young people to explain what should happen when you get stopped and searched, but it's been done very well. 5.1, you've heard the national 20,000 additional police officers has been achieved. And in Nottinghamshire, we took advantage because we got our uplift target a year early. We offered to take on some further officers if we got some more funding for it, and we've done that to bring our numbers up. Knowing that we're going to have to lose some of those officers in the future, but it means we get more officers earlier. I had a visit from the Home Secretary, as you see at 5.3. She came down to see the custody suite with me first. She was particularly impressed with the speech and language stuff that we were doing through the Violence Reduction Partnership. We then went to look at the out-of-court disposals. I hate the word out-of-court disposals because it sounds like it's not important and it's just rubbish and you're getting rid of it. But when you actually give examples of how it could be really effective, such one of the examples was given was a neighbour had basically broken, criminally damaged a fence and caused a bit of trouble. But actually, first time it had ever happened, he hadn't had a history of offending, and he was in drink when he did it. And the neighbour was much happier with the fact that the neighbour paid for the fence, did the apology, so it didn't actually go through the court system, and it was a quick solution. It was better for the victim. There was one little example of an out of court disposal. also I showed the Home Secretary the Consent Coalition stuff, and you know that there's real national interest on this, so we just need to get the RP sorted. It's between ourselves and Nottingham City Council at the moment, but it's got potential to go a lot bigger. We also took her down to see the Digivan, which is where we get best evidence quickly off phones, and then took her to the Forces headquarters, where she went to see one of our some of our new recruits, and she also saw our control room, where I'm really proud to say we still got. You saw it when you came, Chair. That control room is having such a difference in our force. We're doing so well with our calls. We're still the first or second in the country with 999 calls, right up there. 5.4. I'm really involved with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. Now, I'll be honest, I never wanted to take a national lead on anything because I was always very, very much focused on making not safe. But I was asked if I'd take the national lead or joint national lead on victims. And actually, I feel a real advantage to Nottinghamshire if I do this, because it will mean that I'll have more meetings with the ministers and with decision makers, and also get heads up on what's coming. So then, if I want to suggest a cheeky pilot project in Nottinghamshire, sorry. Every time I say I get more money, she goes, "Great! Do you realise how much extra work that's causing me?" But I can't resist the opportunity if I see something needs doing to try and pitch for some more funds. And we do have a reputation in Nottinghamshire of spending money really wisely, and as Phil Gilbert said, we don't give money back. In fact, recently they contacted to say you haven't done your return on what you're giving back, and that was because we weren't giving anything back. We'd spent it all. Consultation and engagement, that continues to be the bit of my job that I enjoy most, and I'm out and about all the time. I won't list all the things that I've been to, but that's only a selection of them. You can see from the budget, we do have an underspend this year, but I'm not going to apologise for that because I'm really careful where the money is spent, and there's a reason for that underspend. National developments, we've spoken about culture and behaviour within the police, and I just want to assure you that with regards to vetting and professional standards, we have a very high level of vetting and professional standards in Nottinghamshire, and I continue to hold the Chief Constable to account on that. So a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm very happy, and I'm sure there's lots of questions coming for me.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that whistle-stop tour. And yes, I'm sure there will be some questions. We can start off, if I may, by inviting Councillor Woodings first of all.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few points to raise. Do you want me to do them all in the same
It would be best, yes. Get them all off your chest.
I will do, thank you. Can I ask, first of all, paragraphs 3.10 and 3.11 on page 36 talks about the Violence Reduction Partnership's new serious violence duty, and we know that funding, as it says there, is split between 40% interventions and 60% labour costs. I just wondered, I know that part of that is that there was, supposed to be a consultation between yourself and partners about how that money's being spent. I know the ICB have raised it as well, but just can you tell us when the consultation will take place on that, and who will be designing the partnership data dashboard, please, for that? Under 3.19, which is about the reparative justice, immediate justice programme, I understand from James Douglas that a lot of that is actually happening as far as reparative justice. I don't know that it's happening as quickly as this project suggests actually happened. But can I ask how and when consultation will be done on those projects as well? Underneath paragraph 3.23, which talks about the Nottinghamshire Breaking Drug Supply Chains Steering Group. I know that has met on one occasion because one of my public health, because I do adult social care and public health, and one of my public health team went along to it, Helen Johnston. I just wondered if there had been, how many times this new steering group has met, please, and how frequent do you anticipate it meeting, and who will be invited to it? And I just want to say I'm really pleased that there are plans to tackle middle and street level drug dealing, because I've been on this committee since 2015. I think, Chair, I've mentioned it every single year that I think it is a blight on people's lives. It affects their feeling of health and well-being. It affects their feeling of safety in their community as well. And I'm really pleased to see resources and focus going on tackling street drug dealing. And I think there's a job of work to be done about increasing public confidence in reporting street drug dealing as well, because you can just send stuff through and you never hear back about it. And that doesn't give you an encouragement to ring through and report again and again and again. And that's what we need, persistent reporting on that. And I would just say again how fantastic Project Reacher has been in my ward since it was introduced there. And, I think it's something we should definitely carry on hammering down on. And then I was going to ask a point about the budget underspend, because I see the Chief Constable's underspend is 2.5 million and the OPCC budget underspend is 2.260 million. I know that also that within the city we've got the remainder of the late night levy spending, which was ceased I think in autumn last year, but I think there's about £250,000 sat in that pot, and I know we've asked for a meeting about how it's going to be spent, and I don't think we've heard back from that either. So I just wondered if you could give us an overview about sort of the main reasons for the underspend and what you're planning to do about that underspend, because when you said it's grant, obviously if it's grant money, you're spending it. And obviously we don't want to give grant money back. But is any of that money due to be given back to government, or is it just year on year underspend that's been sort of rolled up together? So if you could give us a bit of an explanation as to the underspend and what's going to be done about it, I'd appreciate that as well. Thank you.
I'm aware that that's a whole list of
Yeah,
things.
sorry, Chair. You told me to put it
Yes,
all
no,
out there. Yeah, thank you.
I'll try and take them in order, but if I lose any, Councillor Woodens,
Okay.
please let me know. The first question was about the serious violence duty, which to be clear, the serious violence duty is not on us as the Officer of Police and Crime Commissioner or on the VRP, who are convening as we're convening and strategically leading. Sorry, the serious violence duty is on the authorities. So yes, we have to consult with that. If I could pass over to Nicola, are you okay, Nicola, to answer? Because the money we've got about 160,000.
Can I just interject? I don't mean to be rude, but there's a lot of questions, and obviously you want some assistance, not unreasonably, from some of your team. I just wondered, Commissioner, if we've got quite a lot of other questions, if we could perhaps come back to that long list that Councillor Woodings has given you, gives your staff a chance to assist you. If we could pick up some of the other colleagues' questions, if that's okay with you.
Of course, yeah.
Okay with you, because I'm mindful that they'll want to look through the files. And
no, absolutely, that's fine.
Thank you. If we could then go to Mrs. Harding, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
there's two areas that I'd like to concentrate on. One is an area that you obviously are not very keen on, the out of court disposals, but I'm afraid I'm going to ask you about it. Okay, fine. Sorry, I misinterpreted that then. In the report on 3.12, it mentions the new two-tier out-of-court disposals framework in this year. Could you give us a broader outline of what that involves? That's my first question. And then further along in the report, let me just get to the right page. On page 66, there is an element mentioned about youth justice system, and that there are more entrants into the youth justice system in the city than the county. And again, if you could give us a broader outline of how that's being approached. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I was misleading. I actually really like out of court disposals. I just don't like the terming of it, because as a victim, when you hear they've had an out of court disposal, it makes it sound like it's something a bit rubbish, and it's not actually. Can you see my thinking though? Yeah. No. We're waiting national guidance on the new two-tier system that's coming out. We're expecting that imminently, but I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't happen till October, to be frank. Current diversionary provisions, we've got clean slate in the city, which is drugs and alcohol diversion. We've got change, grow, live in the county, which is alcohol and drugs diversion again. Victim support, victim awareness courses, Project Nova, which is a national programme which supports armed forces veterans. Changing lives, it's one that I particularly like. This is particularly for women in the criminal justice system. Break the Cycle is run by the National Holocaust Centre, and that's to do with hate crime. We're also going to be going out to procurement soon for CARA, which is cautioning adult relationship abuse. So we're looking at all the different out of court disposals that we can do. With regard to the amount of young people entering the criminal justice system, historically Nottingham City has been an outlier. It's always been a lot more in the city. We're not completely sure. So through the Violence Reduction Partnership, we've actually commissioned some work to try and find this out. It could be because if somebody is found with a knife, they automatically get a conditional caution in Nottingham. And that might be the right thing to do, but we are digging to find out why there's a difference. But that could be the spike.
I just ask a further question. You say that it's September before this new tier of out-of-court disposals will come through. Is it possible for us to have a report later on in the year to see how they work and whether they're successful? Because obviously you've mentioned quite a few projects there.
Yeah, we've got to get the official guidance first from government as well. It's really difficult because we're having to design what we think we're going to need to have had the official guidance, and it's tricky.
Did you want to pursue this a discussion with the Commissioner perhaps outside the meeting? It seems as if there's something that we can't just crystallise for a conversation here. I've got Councillor Inglis, Councillor Ellis and Councillor Carlton. So Councillor Inglis, he's just popped out. Councillor Ellis, did you want a question?
I can do, I'll substitute for Rob.
He's missed his slot time.
Yeah. Section 5.1. You talk about Operation Uplift. 5.1.
Yeah.
Talk about Operation Uplift.
Yeah.
And as you know, the panel's welcomed the increase in the numbers of officers, and the way under both the previous PCC and Chief Constable and the current administration, Nottinghamshire has been headed again. But we are concerned as a panel about the difference between FTE and headcount. And I think this has been a little bit slippery on the government's part. I looked and the ONS in March 2010 had 146,912 FTE, and March 2019, 126,000 FTE, which is where the 20,000 extra officers came from. But the 20,000 extra officers headcount and not FTE. So it's a bit slippery that. But I mean, if you look to the numbers for Nottinghamshire, in March 2010 there was 2,409 FTE. March 2019, 1,936, and in the Insight paper, March 2023, 2,407 FTE in Nottinghamshire. So we're just about back where we were in 2010. So we're not considerably higher than we were. We're back to where we were. And HMIC, of course, point out that there's been an 8% increase in the population in that time. So we've had a decade of declining numbers, of loss of expertise, and now just back to where we are with a relatively inexperienced workforce and some of the problems we've heard about in terms of confidence, in terms of some of the behaviour. So I suppose the two and you commented earlier on about we got 50 extra officers, but we may have to lose some. So I'd like to know a bit more about what that involves, and what your target is for increasing police numbers going forward.
Okay. The target was 2,357. That was the figure we should have had after the uplift, but there was an opportunity to get funding for an extra 50. Originally it was 31, then an extra 19 to give us an extra 50, but we always knew that we wouldn't be able to keep them. We just took them early because we're always losing. But my target to keep the numbers is 2,357.
So 2,357
Yeah.
FTE.
Yes.
So lower than we were in 2010.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Ellison, or not? I think it's always difficult dealing with bald figures, isn't it? And we haven't got the benefit of the chief here, but I'm sure there would be some conversation around changing policing during that time and greater use of technology we've been hearing about today. So there probably is another side to come back to, but I appreciate we haven't got the chief here today that might have just added a little bit more to that. I've got Councillor Inglis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just sort of relating back now to the public confidence, the reduction, I think it's quite disturbing really that despite the work of the South Notts team and the Rita teams, that confidence has fallen by 9.6%, which is 4 times the county average. So everyone will ask you what you're going to ask the Chief Constable to take into account to what she's doing towards that. But coming back to previous meetings where we've asked for some further research into reasons why that confidence has fallen, to whether that's ready for presentation now or how far that's going.
Thank you, Councillor Inglis. The reason the chief isn't here today, she's actually at the Force Executive Board presenting the new prevention and engagement hub model that I'll be very excited to tell you about in the future. We are doing lots of research on the lack of confidence. Sadly, we've said before, it is a national issue, but they are differences in different areas, and we're doing a lot of research into that. So when it's ready to present, we will do.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, is there any further update on the Forces review of community policing?
The new chief constable has been in post over 100 days now, and she has been looking at the resources that we have and where she would like to place them, where it's her officers to place where she would like to, but there is looking to be a tweak to the model, and at the heart of that is the prevention and engagement hub. So you'll be hearing more about that in the future.
Okay. I look forward to that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I've got Councillor Ellison and the other Councillor Richardson. Yes.
Don't worry, Chair, I get caught in most things and respond to most things. Thank you, Commissioner, for your responses so far. A really informative report. But I'm just going to turn, with permission from the Chair, to an item that's not necessarily contained within your report. I'm going to try and segue under the safeguarding vulnerable people, and I will offer no apology for taking the time to speak about mental health, particularly against the backdrop of the recent announcement by the Metropolitan Police that as of the 31st of October, unless it's a life-threatening issue, that they won't be responding. I understand this is a national directive, and particularly from the pilots that Humberside Constabulary did. It speaks for itself in the terms of that right care, right person approach, and equally from a force resource issue, the numbers of hours lost when handing over into A&E or into mental health crisis issue. But from a sort of an assurance point of view, I would just like to see where we're at in Nottinghamshire in this transition. How are you, as the Police and Crime Commissioner, progressing that wider conversation, particularly across health, social care, charitable and voluntary organisations? And also, in your opinion, what more do you think we need to do in Nottinghamshire before this policy is safely implemented here?
Thank you, Councillor Carlton. The right care, right person approach that Humberside have championed, I can understand why they've championed it. However, if I be honest, it scares me slightly, because I think one of the police's first duty, I'm going to get the terminology wrong because I'm not a police officer, but is the duty to save life. And if somebody is in absolute crisis, and if there's nobody else can go, I think that's a really tough decision for those police officers not to go. But operationally, it will be up to the chief constable what happens. But from my strategic direction, what I did is I convened the crisis care concordat again to get all those strategic leads around the room, including our police and health and everybody. And we had a discussion about where we are in Nottinghamshire. And where we are in Nottinghamshire is 100 miles away from where Humberside were when they started their right care, right person. We already have really good partnership arrangements in Nottinghamshire. I mean, in our control room, you've been there. In our vulnerability hub, we have a mental health professional. Mental health professionals in there. We have the triage cars where we have a mental health one in the county, in the city. We have where we have a mental health professional going out with a warranted police officer. And so we're starting from a much better place, and we have better relationships than I think Humberside had when they started. I can't remember the officer's name. I apologise, but they actually Tracy, the inspector from Humberside who'd led this model, she presented at the crisis care concordat for me. She was from Humberside, and the team's taking note. I want to say his name's James Willett. Does that ring a bell? James Walker. James Walker. He went up to look at Humberside, what they're doing, and actually, our scores on the doors of how many people are going in 136 suites are actually better than theirs anyway. So we're doing a lot of good stuff in Nottinghamshire. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I made a particular point of when the Home Secretary came to visit us in Nottinghamshire. I took her down to the vulnerability hub in the control room, and we did a bit of a pitch to her that actually what we've got in Nottinghamshire, yeah, we can get better, but we're not massively broken to start with. So I'm a little bit nervous about what directive might be coming. So when we will push back, because at the end, yes, we can get better, but we're in a good place to start with. And actually, the results we're getting are better than what Humberside are showing off about. Are there occasions when ambulances don't go because they know they've got a really highly trained police officer on the job? Yes, they are, and that shouldn't happen. But is it always right that a police officer turns up when somebody's in a mental health crisis? We're not always the right people to be doing it, but we're starting from a good place, and we're working as a team with the partners, to get better. But I'm not going to looking to make lots of random announcements like it's been happening in other places.
Did you want to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner. As a mental health champion, for the want of a better phrase, for the County Council, I'm really pleased to hear that response, and particularly that sort of pushback to central government. Actually, in numbers of years, Nottinghamshire has been ahead of the curve. That's not to say that things couldn't be better. Clearly they can, and certainly with my portfolio position within this authority around public health, and we've had the conversation outside of these four walls, that there has got to be a more of a joined up approach, that actually those dots have got to be carefully aligned, because there's quite reference in your Safe Streets presentation, whilst the lamppost wasn't necessarily there for that particular issue, it clearly flagged that actually our communities do have issues, particularly in time, around their safeguarding. Again, I've said before, particularly at Health and Wellbeing Board, I put it back on the table. If there's anything that we can do across councils and yourself and your office and the Chief Constable to close those dots down, to keep people safe, then let's have that conversation.
Did you want to come back, Commissioner? Thank you. Thank you. I've just got Councillor Richardson, and then we'll come back to Councillor Woodings. Councillor Mohat now. Write you down. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a question on paragraph 3.19, reparative activity. And there's a question within a question. Is that the same as restorative justice, or is it different? Because the main question is that we've had cases where we've in Mansfield we've asked for this activity to take place, and it's not been able to take place because there's no toilet facilities. So the question is, would it be possible to provide portaloos to end, so some areas are not disenfranchised from accepting this activity? And I've got another question as well, if I may.
Is that to the Commissioner?
The second one.
The second question.
Yeah, it's following on from Councillor Wooding's question on the underspend. And forgive me if it's in there. Is there any particular components to this underspend?
Really sharp answers, but I'm going to go to Nicola first for the reparative restorative because they are different, and then Gillian for my underspend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Reparative activity and restorative justice are different. So the definition that we would follow for restorative justice is that it's activity where it's bringing the offender and the victim into communication, and the purpose of that is to repair the harm that's been caused, but there needs to be some kind of communication. It could be indirect through letters, but there is some form of communication channel. Whereas reparative is some activity that may repair the harm, but it's not necessarily about the communication. So that's how I'd see the difference. I think you mentioned portaloos, as part of the immediate justice, which I know you've raised, Councillor Woodings, and the Commissioner's already said that there are some challenges with the immediate justice programme, which we are working through and will be working through with partners. But one of the challenges is not necessarily portaloos per se, but the need for equipment and what needs to sit around reparative activity in order to make it successful. So that is something that we, my colleague Phil and I and others, will be looking at as we seek to roll the immediate justice programme out. So I hope that helps.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Shall we go back to Councillor Woodings and then Councillor Mohammed? Okay, fine.
Okay, so I'll try and pick up all the underspend points previously and that question. So page 44 of the pack sets out how the underspend has arisen. There's a very detailed table at the top of that page which sets out the Chief Constable's underspend, so on the budget that was delegated to the Chief at the start of the year for 22-23. And then paragraph 7.5 talks about the underspend on the PCC's budget itself. Now, that budget itself is split into the budget for the office and the PCC and that democratic core element, and then the commissioning budget, which is why the underspend is split into 1.2 million on the office and democratic core, and just over 700,000 on the grants and commissioning budget. So on the office itself, you'll be aware that there was a new staffing structure implemented. And as with all these things, we set the budget back in February, and it takes quite a considerable amount of time to recruit those people, particularly going through vetting as they have to. And those people were quite significantly started later in the financial year than would have been planned when a whole year of budget would have been included. So that was an element of it. There was a partnerships budget for 265k that was included that wasn't required. When we've looked at the budget setting for the current year, 23-24, we've removed that completely because there was no requirement for that to be in that budget. So naturally it did underspend in 22-23, but we've rectified that in the subsequent year. And there was also £500,000 for grants and commissioning in addition to the grants and commissioning budget that is separate. And that was very much as seen as the Commissioner's priority areas, so that if there's some things cropped up in the year that weren't part of the original plan, there was budget there for activity to take place. That's actually going to be carried forward into the current financial year, so 23-24, and the team have been working hard with the Commissioner to formalise what a priority list for that budget would be. So that concludes that element of it. The grants and commissioning budget, again, lack of staff in that team. I think it was halfway through the year when some of that team were in post, and obviously you have a budget but you need people to administer it. There's a lot of work goes into the commissioning process and setting up funding agreements that supports all that. So it was a bit of under profiling. Obviously at the start of the year when you set a budget, you make a plan, and hopefully that plan will come into being, but quite rightly, if things don't go quite to plan, we don't allocate the money that was promised. So in some of those areas, an amount was estimated at the start of the year, but then actual amounts and allocations were slightly under, so that contributed to that as well. In terms of what happens to it, there's a formulation of a proposal that hasn't formally gone to the Commissioner yet. We've talked about it in meetings with the Chief Constable, but we need to do a decision record that will record where it's all going to be allocated, but it's a mixture of across the force and the PCC's office, a mixture of carry forwards, so for things that were budgeted last year are in train but haven't quite happened yet, so the money is still needed. That will just be carried forward into the current 23-24 year. There's an element of some earmark reserves, so where there's some specific activity, such as we've had a report carried out on our insurance reserve and our provisions around insurance claims. We'll need to top that up a bit in accordance with that report. And then, I don't know if you'll be familiar with it, but there is always a general fund reserve, which is where any balance of any underspend will go into. But as soon as we do that formal decision record, I can make sure that's provided so that you can have a look at exactly what the decision on that has been and close that loop on that financial year. In terms of the late night levy, the money that is remaining on that is in an earmark reserve. So it requires a formal process to draw it down. It's not part of this underspend at all. It's safely specifically, and I can show you again in the reserve strategy where that is sitting at the moment, awaiting sort of allocation.
Thank you very much. I think any further detail is best sent direct or sent to ourselves so we can issue it to all members of the panel. But hopefully that's give you some comfort, Councillor.
But there's money left over, so you have to have it sitting in the reserve. As soon as it's used up, the reserve will go. But at the moment, there's funds left over that haven't been spent yet, so it has to be safely parked to cross over the financial years. It's money that's been collected previously.
Yeah, I understand that. I suppose I think our team is keen to know what the money's going to be spent on.
Yeah. I'm going to interrupt. This is detail that needs to be a conversation between the two of you, with the greatest of respect. I don't think we can go into that sort of detail here. Otherwise, we'll be going till 5 o'clock.
Just really quickly, it has been agreed what it's going to be spent on. We're going to carry on with the safe space pledge. Going to be doing more of the training for safe spaces, and for further support of the Consent Coalition work. The meetings have happened, and I think it's going to start to be delivered over the next 6 months.
Thank you, Councillor Mahat. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just really need 2 questions, if I may, Chair. One following on from Rob about trust and confidence. We know the corrosive nature of trust and confidence. Policing only works by consent. I understand that the Commissioner's team have already been working on this, and I'm really interested if she could explain how the analysis so far is shaping the programme in activity and targeting, particularly around the historical 3 protected characteristics around BAME communities, young people and gender. Also, if she could provide a indicative timeline and a rollout for the full programme. And following on with that, paragraph 4.3 discusses the independent community scrutiny panel. I was really interested in what does the work programme look for that scrutiny panel, and how the priorities are identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Mohammed. Everything that the police needs to start building trust and confidence more, which is why I'm so excited about this new prevention and engagement hub. The work that I do around trust and confidence, we're doing the surveys to try and understand which sections and where people trust and why. If they don't trust, why. Interestingly, when you speak to people, as I did at the Hemlock happening this weekend, when their trust in local policing it was strong, but their trust in policing overall isn't. And we know that could be the national picture that's reflecting on us. But what we need is people to trust to be able to report when they need help. The independent scrutiny panel, Dan would be more of an expert on this, but I know the work they've been doing recently has been on looking at the stop and search videos. I don't want to come in, Dan.
Yeah, I mean it's fairly newly formed group. I think it's sort of met a couple of times. The priorities are being set among the participants, but it will be focusing on use of force, stop and search. I think it's one of the relevant that escapes me at the moment. But we can share that programme as and when it's the forward plan for the independent scrutiny plan as it's formulated.
Did you want to come back, Councillor?
Yes, please, Chair. In terms of trust and confidence, we know in the city that our CPOs are a uniformed service, and they're quite often mistaken as police officers, and they do have a lot of trust and confidence. Would the Police Crime Commissioner think it wise if the Chief Constable delegated more powers to them?
I'm going to park that and ask the Chief Constable if that's okay.
We look forward to hearing the answer. Thank you for that. I'm conscious that there are some other issues you want to come back to with Councillor Woodings, I think.
Sorry, Councillor Woodings, can you recap the ones you haven't had an answer to?
So just to pick up on that one, the VRP is leading on it. My understanding is that there are monthly implementation groups, multi-agency groups happening now to look at how it's going to be implemented. You're correct about the funding and about the funding split, but in terms of who's going to be designing the data dashboard, I will have to double check when I get back to the office, but my understanding is that contract hasn't been awarded yet.
And then on the reparative projects, I asked how the consultation would be done on the reparative projects that were going to come out of the immediate justice bill.
Yeah, so do you want me to pick up on that one as well? So a letter will be coming shortly to each of the local authorities, but also to probation and obviously including the Youth Justice Services to start that process, and that is in recognition that it's absolutely got to be a multi-agency initiative. And as you've already indicated and the Commissioner's indicated, there are some things that need working through in order to make sure it's a real success for Nottinghamshire.
Thank you. And then on the breaking drug supply chains steering group.
Yeah, so the Breaking Drug Supply Chains group has met twice since January. It was due to meet a couple of weeks ago, but that meeting's been postponed due to organisational capacity at the time. But I think it was originally envisaged to meet, that it would be meeting monthly, but after the first two meetings, we sort of identified such a wide range of activity that was already taking place through the serious and organised crime partnership boards in the city and the county, the regional organised crime unit, Operation Reacher, as you mentioned. There's the drug monitoring group and operational tasking arrangements. So we realised that there's an awful lot happening, and the purpose of this group is about bringing transparency and coordination to that, so that it can be fed up through the governance structure to the combating substance misuse partnership. So it'll now be meeting quarterly. With a view to kind of mapping out these various partnerships, applying some rigour to the performance management approach, and sort of the targets and ambitions that feed this pillar. It's got representation from the community safety partnerships, all civil enforcement agencies, public health, the East Midlands Strategic Operations Unit. There's quite a wide range of partners engaged, but again, we recognise that a lot of this work is taking place elsewhere, so we don't want to just duplicate the meeting. We want to get the right people from the right agencies to just provide that transparency of reporting. So yeah, the next meeting will be within the next 2 months, and it will be a quarterly meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. I think we've gone through that pretty thoroughly, Commissioner. So oh yes.
So just another one for you. Just want to balance the books a bit, really. I've got an interest in officer welfare as well. We talk about public victims. We've not mentioned officer victims. We're seeing an increase now in officers being assaulted. We've got the Assault and Emergency Workers Act came in from 2018. But what I do find horrifying is recently, nationally, not just in Notts, there's been some incidents where officers received life-changing injuries or serious injuries that have received a suspended sentence. Now, that is not sending the message out to the public, and supporting our officers. They're the ones running into danger. So what I'm asking is your sort of position now on the national side for victims is to include the cops on victims and to lobby government for those sentences to reflect the seriousness and to sort of try and put a stop to this we're seeing across the whole board of emergency services.
can absolutely assure you, Rob Inglis, I'm already on it. There's an example of an incredibly brave officer called Dan Griffin, who was horrifically attacked, and he was, really, really well looked after afterwards by the police and by the Police Federation, and he's a star, and he is now, back on the streets as a police officer. But the person who attacked him, rather than getting attempted murder, which was what was expected, he got GBH with intent, and 8 years, and that doesn't seem fair for what happened to that officer. So I've already raised that at the highest level, just to make sure, just to make sure that the police officers know we've got their backs. Running into danger. Not something else I've been raising at the highest level as well. I have to do a very quick shout out to all the specials that we have working for us, who are volunteers, particularly as it's Volunteers Week. But I met a special on Saturday who actually would love to become a police officer, but can't afford to become a police officer and take the pay cut. And that's not. I mean, it was this guy. He's a plasterer. He doesn't run his own business. He's just a day rate plasterer, which I recognise is on the tools, and it should be getting a good rate for that. But how is it fair that a police officer, how much training they have to do and they run to danger, for him to come and join the police force, he'd have to take a drop in money, and that doesn't feel right. So I'm lobbying for fairer pay for our police officers too.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for all your patience during all those questions. Thank you. If people are content, I'm suggesting we move on to item 9, the police and crime performance. People have had a chance to read it. I'm mindful of time. We've got 2 things to get through, and just perhaps ask for just a very short presentation of highlights, and we can whisk through it. Thank you. Over to you, Dan, I think.
So, yep, that's fine. So this is the report to the end of March 2023. So this actually represents the end of the year picture really for 2022-23. Love to be reporting on a sea of green, but it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's largely affected by the vast number of kind of public confidence indicators that we've got included in there, recognising a lot of the national events, the factors that are likely to be impacting on that picture, the cost of living crisis, and so on. So, but in absolute terms, there are some challenges, but in relative terms, and in comparison to other similar areas, NOTS is generally maintaining a good to middling performance position in respect of all the indicators shown there. So very quickly, the highlights: neighbourhood crime is still tracking 31% below the pre-COVID level, particularly burglary, 35% lower, robbery 20% lower, vehicle crime 28%. So those serious acquisitive crime rates are considerably lower than they were pre-COVID. Criminal asset recovery, we mentioned in the paper, has pretty much doubled in the last year, just shy of 1 million recovered in the last year, a proportion of that being reinvested into local projects and initiatives. Levels of reported modern slavery, again, that's seen an increase in the last year, back up to pre-COVID levels. Child criminal exploitation, referrals into the national referral mechanism. We've seen some of the highest levels recorded over the last 6 months. So generally a positive picture. This is an area that we're trying to see increased reporting, increased referral, increased identification. Violent knife crime, again, is showing a downward trend over the last year compared to the pre-COVID trend. 7% lower currently than the pre-COVID level. So moving quickly on to the negative exceptions, we've talked quite a bit already about the public confidence and that challenge of increasing levels of public confidence as measured by a survey to 60% by March 2024. We're clearly falling significantly short of that at 53% currently, although the reduction has plateaued, as you can see in the chart that's shown on page 58. Interestingly, in the latest tranche of results, one of the factors that's seen the largest deterioration in public confidence is police reputation, which has fallen by 7.7%. So the perceptions, residents' perceptions that the police have a good reputation among local people. So we surmise that this has been heavily affected by the case of review and into standards of behaviour in the Met, and the cases such as Wayne Couzens, David Carrick, and so on. we list in the report a whole range of activity that's been pulled together to try and address that deterioration in public confidence. Not least the prevention and engagement hub that's being discussed currently at the Force Executive Board. And new initiatives such as the rapid response video response, which we're quite excited about. It's shown some really good results in Essex and Kent, but this is around having a immediate video response to certain types of reported crime, so that officers are able to assess the risk, advise on preservation of evidence, and gather evidence if necessary remotely. So this is a really sort of important opportunity that's currently being explored. We flag here the rise in levels of recorded rape and serious sexual offences. We have said that, again, increase in reporting is good, but an increase in the underlying prevalence of serious sexual offences is clearly not a good thing. We're not in a position really to be able to determine what is driving this increase currently, but we flag that as a potential area of concern that we're sort of doing more research into. Again, the Commissioner's response to that is very firmly focused in the preventative sphere, and the work that's being done to expand healthy relationships in schools, and the range of support services for survivors of sexual assault. I've also mentioned the increasing levels of online fraud and cyber-dependent crime, 18% rise in the last year. This continues a trend that was seen prior to the COVID pandemic, and was in part exacerbated by it. And again, we've listed quite a wide range of activity there that's currently being undertaken, largely again in the preventative sphere, to sort of raise awareness, bring partners together as part of the local fraud partnership, to look at how we prevent, effectively respond, support victims, and collaborate to reduce fraud. I'll finish there.
Thank you very much, Dan, for that whistle-stop tour. Thank you. I'll just check if any colleagues want to raise any questions. Councillor Woodings first. Thank you.
Well, just very quickly, I think you're absolutely right to flag the 6.1% increase in rape and serious sexual offences, and we're fully supportive of the drive to healthy relationship programmes within schools, the consent coalition work that's taking place, and as I said before, a lot of the preventative measures. I think harking back to this point about levels of trust in the police as to what's happening out there as far as the confidence to report is concerned. I noticed on the 16th of April that The Guardian did a national freedom of information request asking about the proportion of cases amongst police forces of inappropriate sexual behaviour from both serving police officers and police staff as well, and indicated that in some parts of the country there's actually a higher prevalence of inappropriate behaviour within the Met. I just wanted to ask, I noticed the figure for Nottinghamshire Police was 63 cases reported last year, and I appreciate that's an operational point, Caroline, but I just wanted to ask, obviously your response as Commissioner, I'm presuming, would be to contact the Chief Constable and ask for a level of confidence and assurance and understanding about the complaints. Are they from members of the public, or are they internal complaints from within Notts Police? What processes are being followed? Are those processes being robustly followed? And are you confident about the standard of investigation that's been taking place as a result of those complaints coming forward, and the outcomes that come out of it as a result of that? Because I think there is a big public concern about the fact that people previously been found guilty of inappropriate behaviour, but that hasn't led to consequences that lead to somebody actually losing their job within the police force, which one would, it feels like we're at that point where there needs to be actual action where the public can say complaint was made action was taken, that person is no longer able to abuse their uniform or their position and access to information within the police. So I wondered if you could just give us a bit of an oversight of what action you took on a result of those figures and statistics coming out.
Thank you. It wasn't just those figures coming out. At the accountability board, I regularly get the update on the professional standards. Actually, Hayley, the inspector there, comes and gives a report to me. I ask them very robust questions. We do need to remember that out of those 63 cases, no, some of those could be vexatious. It doesn't necessarily mean that every one of those is a bad apple. But I am confident that we have a really robust professional standards department in Nottinghamshire, and also within the force there's a real call it out culture. Next time you come down to Forces headquarters, you'll see posters everywhere, giving just reminding and giving people examples of how you don't abuse your power as a police officer. And it's the new chief constable has done a call it out campaign. One thing that I'm speaking to the new chief constable about is how it's really difficult to get the balance right to how public we should be when somebody gets dismissed from the police force, because you want to reassure the public that if somebody is doing the wrong thing, they get dismissed, but also and it is all there on the website if you dig, but it's not as easy to find as I don't think it should be. So I think we need more transparency needs to be there, so people have confidence to report if something isn't right, knowing that it will be really robustly tackled in Nottinghamshire.
Thank you. I've got Mr. Bob Vaughan Newton and then Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm struggling a bit with the terminology. What is the difference between all serious sexual offences, including rape, and rape and serious sexual offences? If we look to page 74, there's a table, and we've mentioned this previously, that the figures don't add up. We've had an explanation that there's a minor difference between adding together the adult and child rape and serious sexual offences figures and comparing that with the all serious sexual offences, including rape, because there were unknown ages involved, but that only corresponded to about 3%. However, the difference between adding together the two RASO figures and the total all serious sexual offences, including rape, appears to be about 20%. Dan?
Yeah, I will have to sort of bring back a more detailed response to that, but essentially, it's around that there are different mechanisms for classifying crime types. So, one is based on a list of particular Home Office codes, but the Home Office also have a separate crime tree that has a different classification of serious sexual offences, including rape, and they don't add up, and there are technical reasons. Which I can bring back to you that show that discrepancy, but I don't have it here at the moment, I'm afraid. But it's a formal sort of crime recording process and the way in which they're bundled up. But it does seem illogical. I appreciate, given that they're more or less the same title.
Yeah.
But the important thing to note is that the trends are tracking exactly the same across both categories. It's just one excludes a particular type of serious sexual offence.
Okay. One other thing.
I just add very quickly. I wanted to know why we didn't know the ages, because I thought that was a bit odd last time. So I asked, but it tends to be with third-party reporting.
Sure.
So if somebody's reported they've seen something happen, somebody, and we don't know the age, that was the 3%.
Okay. The other question that I have follows on from Councillor Richardson from Bassett-Hall, speaking about the invisibility of PCSOs. I can see that the 2019-20, and this is page 69, the 2019-20 baseline had full-time equivalent PCSO service strength of 169.2, and by March 2022 that had fallen to 142.9, and then thereafter it's dropped away and we're now reporting 138.8. There are good reasons why PCSO numbers have dropped, particularly at a time when we're recruiting a lot of new cops. Some PCSOs make a choice to put themselves forward to become a warranted officer, having worked with warranted officers in the past, and that's a good thing. However, PCSOs carry out a particularly important role within the context of neighbourhood policing, in that they're much more likely to know the people and get upstream of future offending by getting to know the young people who might be tempted into future offending. Um, do you have plans, or are you aware of the chief having plans to try to restore the levels, please?
I would double check with Gillian, but my memory is that we've included 150 PCSOs in this year's budget. Yeah, so there will be, and from memory, there was a PCSO to PC fast track course that's been through. So we have lost a chunk of PCSOs, but those PCSOs are going to be great PCs because they've already got all that experience. But we are looking to recruit because we want to keep the number at 150.
You want to come back? Okay, thank you. Councillor Ellis, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Page 59, paragraph 4.5 says Nottinghamshire maintains a comparative strong performance position in terms of criminal justice outcomes for Ray, with a 6.6% of offences resulting in a positive outcome. I mean, 6.6 doesn't seem particularly good. Is that are we comparatively strong in a very weak field?
I like you, I'm horrified by that 6.6%, and I know that's almost double the national average, which is just wrong. Last week, I was at a meeting with the Solicitor General and the Attorney General, and we were speaking about the impact of court delays on positive outcomes, and we've quadrupled in Nottinghamshire the amount of IDVAs, independent domestic violence advisors, we have, and we know that when a victim or survivor has IDVA working with them, they're more likely to get through the criminal justice and court system. But you'll see it was one of my commitments in my policing crime plan to get that number up, and I'm doing all I can on that. I'm also working with MSU on they have a forensic unit that's based in Nottinghamshire to make sure we get best forensic evidence early. And we've invested in our new SARC, our Sexual Assault Referral Centre, to give survivors the best. It's never going to be a good experience, but to support them as much as they can. And that's been put together and by people with lived experience, just to try everything we can do to get the best results. It is something I'm really pushing for.
Mrs. Harding, did you want to make a comment from the magistrate's point of view?
I tend to agree with the Commissioner on the delays that are happening, particularly with domestic violence. And so occasionally we do get problems with the police file, which is not complete, so we can't proceed to prosecute and the case is dismissed. In terms of sexual offences, they tend to go to the Crown Court, the majority of them, so I can't really comment on that.
Thank you. Did you want to? Okay. Well, if there are no other comments, thank you very much, colleagues. Can I move then to paper 10, which is the annual complaints report produced by the County Council's monitoring officer, which is really purely for information. Are there any questions? I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm not the author of the report. I think it's just here for information. If there's no questions, then can I thank everyone for your forbearance and thank you for your support. Have a safe journey, everyone, and declare the meeting closed. Good afternoon.